He's recovering and he's on narcotics, so you probably don't want him up here teaching.
That could be fun.
Yeah, it might be interesting. Anyway, 5 weeks ago, I began to serve on the elder board. So 3 weeks ago, because Matt was sick, so I taught on my second week, and now this is my 5th week, and so I'm going to teach again. So I might need you to lend me a little extra grace today. So, wait, that's a good one, right? So just so you know, Tom makes comments all throughout the service. And so every once in a while, I'll just have a little interaction with Tom, and that's okay. Everybody can just relax, but we'll get through it, all right? Okay. So the first thing that I want us to do is understand something about our brain, okay? So the amygdala in our brain is this little thing right in the primitive center in our brain, and it scans our environment 24/7 to give us information, internal and external, about safety, what threats are available. And what it does is it alerts us to whether we need to fight, flee, freeze, submit, or dissociate. Those are the 5 moves of the amygdala. And then it affects our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive functioning, impulse control, rationality, planning, those kinds of things. And if our amygdala says, threat, not safe, then it fires and goes, whoop, disconnects us from our prefrontal cortex, and then all we're trying to do is survive. And so then we go into those 5 moves of the amygdala, and then we can't learn, we can't connect, and we can't grow. So because of that reality, sometimes when we're in a group like this, some of us feel very unsafe because it's a new environment, people that we don't know, and so our amygdala's going, woo, and we're flipped lid. And so one thing I want to do to address that is help us feel more calm. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a chance to greet each other, but in a certain way. So on this side, I did this 3 weeks ago, and I learned some things about it, but here's what we're going to do. I want, if you are a handshaker, fist bumper, or waver, that's where you feel comfortable, you're going to stand up and get to this side over here of the auditorium. And if you are a hugger, and you like safe, healthy, touch, hug, connection, then you're going to come to this side, okay? So if you want to connect with your body, then you come to this side. If you want to have some space and distance, you can either put out your hand, do a wave, or a fist bump, okay? So in just a second, I'm going to have you stand up and make your moves. And if you're on this side, I want you to shake hands, wave, or fist bump at least 15 people and tell them your name. And if you're on this side, I want you to hug at least 15 people and tell them your name. Okay? Ready, go. my life are in this room today. My mother, would you please stand? This is my mother, Carol. And my wife, Amy. And my daughter, Lydia. Where is she? Right back there. My dad is attending to his dad, who's 99 and a half and fell and broke his hip in California, so he and his brother are down there, that's why he's not here. And my two sons are here, but I just want to talk about the women because they're all here. Yeah. Well, I came across a story recently that I want to share with you. It's about a pastor who, one Saturday afternoon, from a local church, he was going to visit one of his parishioners. He drove up to the person's house, parked, got out, walked up the sidewalk through the garden to the door, knocked gently, knowing the person was home. No answer. After waiting a minute, the pastor knocked again, this time with a bit more rapidity and vigor. No answer. Somewhat perplexed, the pastor pulled out his notebook and wrote on a piece of paper, Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, which says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me." This the pastor taped to the door and left. The next morning at church, the pastor received a note from the person he had gone to visit the day before. All that was on the note was a single verse from the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 10, and the person's signature. It read, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." Sometimes there's reasons why people don't open doors. Okay. So, who was here 3 weeks ago when I talked about navigating conflict in a loving way? Raise your hand. Okay. So, some of you are going to need to catch up when the video gets posted from 3 weeks ago so that today will make more sense. Because last night, I packed 2 services into one. So it was really long. So I'm not going to do that this morning. So this is a continuation of 3 weeks ago, which is navigating relational conflict in a loving way. So we use Luke 10 as our text. Pastor Matt is teaching through the book of Luke and then Acts. And so we just jumped ahead a little bit to Luke 10, which is the story of the Good Samaritan. And we learned that the Good Samaritan took care of this man who he didn't even know. He got beat up. And so the question that Jesus was answering was, who is my neighbor? And so the answer was, anybody who is around you. Crystal's my neighbor, Tom's my neighbor, Mike's my neighbor, Scout's my neighbor. I want Scout to be my neighbor because he's got some pipes and he'll protect me if I need it. And so my neighbor is anybody who's around me. And then Jesus says in Matthew 22, 37 to 40, he's answering a question, and they say, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus answers and says, love the Lord your God, and I translate, with your whole self, every part of you. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. Okay. Who's your neighbor? Everybody. That's right, the whole world. So we know who our neighbor is, which is anybody. And then Jesus says to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And most of us know how to love ourselves, even though some of us don't love ourselves. But we know how because we're doing it all the time. We're constantly trying to meet our own wants and needs. All the time. The reason I know this is because anytime you get upset about anything, you have just exposed the fact you're trying to love yourself, to take care of yourself, to get your wants, needs, hopes, desires, and wishes met. This is what's called our program for happiness. So we naturally love ourselves, meaning try to take care of ourselves and help ourselves get our wants, needs, hopes, and desires and wishes met. Some of us have trauma, and so we've learned not to love ourselves because we either told ourselves we're not valuable or it's not safe, these kinds of things. The natural state is to love ourselves. If we have trauma, we have some soul work to do. Okay. But the natural state is to love ourselves. So Jesus says, love your neighbor, which is anybody, the way that you love yourself, which is I'm always trying to get my wants, needs, hopes, desires, and wishes met. All right. So we established that, and then what we talked about is we're going to take an angle on this passage to say, well, how do we apply that when we're having relational conflict? Has anybody in here ever had a conflict with another human being? Not tooth. It's nice to have wings, isn't it? So the state of humans outside of the Garden of Eden is now riddled with conflict. Garden of Eden that God created, perfect environment. No conflict, no death, no disease, no sickness, perfect relationship with self, others, God, nature, and animals. Perfect environment. No need for psychological defenses. Safe. Your amygdala is always not firing. That is the natural state that God desired for human beings when He created them. And that's what we used to have. Outside of the Garden of Eden, now we're regularly in a state of this. Flipping our lid, trying to feel safe. First level, concentric level of needs as a human being. Security, survival, safety. Next one. Power, control, freedom. Next one. Love, belonging, affection, esteem, fun. That's up here. But the bottom one is safety. You want to see a human being squirm? Put them in an unsafe environment. They're not going to care about all these other things. They want safety. So outside of the Garden of Eden, we have conflict because each of us are trying to get our wants and needs met in a particular way, and sometimes that's in conflict to someone else. So the question is, why do we have conflict with other humans? Well, because we're not getting what we want. I told my wife a few years ago, I said, Amy, here's all I want from you. This is it. I'm just going to simplify it for you. And here's what I said. I want you to affirm everything I do. I want you to never have an issue with anything I do. I want you to help me get what I want, when I want it, in the way I want it, all the time. Now, some of you are smiling, some of you are laughing. Why? Because that's ridiculous. What I just said is absolutely ridiculous. But that's actually what I want. What about you? Is that what you want? You want someone to never have an issue with anything you do, to affirm everything that you do, and to help you get what you want, when you want it, in the way you want it, all the time? Is that fair? Isn't that what you want? So what happens when you don't get that? Conflict. That's right. In the back, my son says, flip lid. That's right. So we have conflict with another human being. So what we're talking about is, okay, so when we aren't getting our wants, needs, hopes, desires, wishes met, we have conflict with another human being, how are we going to take the teachings of Jesus Christ, who is the smartest human being that ever lived on the earth, God in the flesh, teaching us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And that's what He says to us. So how do we do that when someone else is getting in the way of me getting what I want? How do I do that? In a loving way. Wow, now it gets complicated. Because we actually have to parse out, well, what does it look like to have a loving exchange when we have conflict? That's what we're going to talk about today. Because we talk a lot in Christianity about love. The Bible says in 1 John 4, God is love. So if God is love, Jesus Christ came because of the love of God and wants to save humanity. He He wants us to love each other. That's a pretty big theme in the Bible. Now,
how about the cross?
the cross, that's a good way.
That's
That's
love.
love, that's right. Thank you. So you can keep a tally of how many times Tom talks during this mission. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so then it becomes difficult to figure out, well, how do I actually love people? If Jesus says to love my neighbors, I love myself. I have conflict because I'm not getting what I want or need. And then all of a sudden I have to figure out, well, how do I do it in a loving way where I would treat them the way that I want to be treated? Okay, that sounds difficult to me. Because remember, I just told you I want to get everything that I want the way that I want it all the time. I don't want any problems. Just give it to me the way I want. And then I got married. And that was the great curbing to that mentality. Okay, so what we're going to do today is figure out when I don't get what I want and I have conflict with someone and my amygdala starts to fire and I'm in a state of threat, I'm not safe, and I have a style of conflict that comes up that says, here's how I'm going to try to help you get my wants and needs met. I'm either going to, and I talked about this 3 weeks ago, so you can go listen, but I'm just going to briefly repeat it. I either escalate, I stonewall, shut down, I name call, I argue, I minimize, I cry, I argue, I deny. These are all the different styles that we have of trying to get our wants and needs met. Some of them are kind of effective, but most of them don't work. So we have this style, and it's connected to when we were young, we were imprinted, 0 to age 8, with comfort. How did we receive comfort? When we were upset. So our family of origin environment imprinted on us how we will expect to receive comfort so that I can get my wants and needs met and feel safe and feel okay. All right? So, depending on what you received, reassurance, touch, empathy, animal friends, real animals, nothing, or some other thing, will determine how your brain is wired. Fire together, wire together. That's how our brains work. So if you had an experience and it was repeated over time, then you form a neural bundle in your brain, and that's what you will expect naturally when you're in a conflict situation. Now, if your spouse or your friends or whoever doesn't understand this comfort program, you're going to have some conflict. So, then we say, well, gosh, how do I let others know what I actually want and need in a way that's mutually respectful so that I can get what I want, but I'm also respectful of them? Okay? That takes us to the next level, which is, well, when I don't get my wants and needs met, my emotions come up, my feelings, and they say hurt, sad, angry, frustrated, irritated, annoyed, guilty, ashamed, discouraged. That's what the feelings say. And they're just indicator lights on the dashboard. They're telling us what's going on underneath the hood at the wants, needs, hopes, desires, wishes level. So, I don't get my wants and needs met, I have feelings. Why do I have negative feelings? Because one of my wants and needs was not met, my program for happiness. Then, right at that point, I have to make a decision of how I'm going to interact with this person. And if you are a Christian, or you're thinking about being a Christian, then all of a sudden you're starting to think about, well, how do I do it in a loving way? Okay. I have a handout for you. Ari and Lydia, are you in here? Will you guys come up? Will you help me? To this side. So just do a stack of them like this, up and down, and then you give a stack. Let's get one more time. This. And then you give it. anybody not have one back there? Okay, so on your handout are 4 pages. On the first page is feelings when your wants and needs, hopes, desires, and wishes are met. These are positive feelings. These don't create conflict usually. Unless you're over happy in the morning early and someone else feels annoyed. So that's possible. There's actually a proverb about that. A loud voice early in the morning stirs up trouble. On the next page, so on the back of the first page, are feelings when your wants, needs, hopes, desires, and wishes are not met. Now, you'll notice, if you read through these, that none of these implicate wrongdoing on someone else's part. None of these words attack, label, judge, criticize, or assess anybody else. They are ownership words. Because the fastest way to start a conflict with someone when you want to share your feelings is to say things like, you disrespected me, you belittled me, you humiliated me. They're going to get defensive. So that's going to be, you will have started that conflict if you and I say that. So here's the words that help you say what you're feeling without saying that someone else did something wrong. Because wrong is fairly relative. Only God has the God's eye view of right and wrong in every moment. I occasionally get close to it. But I don't trust that enough to make dogmatic statements about your intentions toward me. So I'm going to use words like this that keep it a little bit more distant so that you don't get defensive and you can actually hear me so I can get my wants and needs met so that we can have peace. 1 Thessalonians 5:13, live at peace with one another. Reconciliation is so important to Jesus Christ. In Matthew 5, he says, therefore, if anyone's at the altar presenting his offering and there remembers that someone has something against him, let that person leave the offering, leave the altar, go their way, first be reconciled to their brethren, and then come and present your offering. So he wants us to live at peace with one another, to have reconciled relationships, openness of heart with no defenses. That's peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict. That's just the absence of conflict. Peace is a state of soul where your soul is open to another person, where you can give and receive love freely without having to protect yourself. That's peace. Now, to get to that state, you have to feel safe, and most of us need to feel understood. So, let's see, page 3, the top of it has more feelings when your wants and needs are not met. And then it goes into the wants and needs list. So if you want to understand yourself and other people at a deep level, get familiar with this list. Because as soon as you understand these things at a deep level, you are going to be able to connect with other people at the soul level. Intimacy. Into me, see. You will get to see into me and I into you when you understand these things at this level. So the feelings are the indicator lights. Oh, one of my wants and needs is not met. And then we go right underneath the hood and we find that there's unmet wants and needs. That's this list. So if you want to understand yourself and we want to understand others, then we have to pay attention to what feelings are coming out and then what the unmet wants and needs are. Some of us have learned not to pay attention to our feelings because it wasn't safe, or no one cared, or you got criticized. And so some of you learned to shut down your feelings because no bueno, not safe. So this will be an opportunity for you to begin to grow in your ability to connect to what's happening inside of you at the feeling level, because that's the indicator light that will tell you about the treasure, which is the unmet want, need, hope, desire, and wish. Okay. So, once we get to this place, then we're like, okay, I can begin to articulate myself, and if I'm not strong enough of soul to tolerate saying how I feel, or tolerating someone else's negative emotion, usually it's anger, hurt, fear, disgust, irritation that we can't tolerate in other people. If we are not strong enough of soul, then this is a spiritual formation opportunity, which is daily, and I do this daily, we pray, God, would you strengthen the structure of my soul so I can tolerate reality, the truth of myself and the truth of other people, my negative emotions and their negative emotions, so that I do not shut down and take myself out of reality. Because if I'm out of reality, I can't connect at a deep level. It's just all superficial. If you want to have a deep connection, you have to be in reality. Reality is where God is. But if we're not strong enough of soul, it's going to be tough to connect in reality. So this is why we pray this. Yes?
One time, I prayed for 17, actually 7 times, or early.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, here we are at this point. Now we're going to get real practical. So we say, okay, remember, how do I navigate conflict in a loving way? Who is my neighbor? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now we understand the human being at a little bit deeper level. When I don't get what I want in just the way I want it, out pop my negative feelings because one of my wants and needs has not been met. Now, just because we have wants and needs doesn't mean someone else should always meet them, because some of them are filled with nonsense and are destructive. Some of us desire drugs and alcohol. Some of us desire pornography. Some of us desire to win and be boss and be powerful and be over others. So, are those the kinds of things that I'm talking about, helping others get their wants and needs met? No. Because we're always thinking about how to help people become more loving, to be more like Jesus Christ, because he says, make disciples of all the nations. Matthew 28. Go and make disciples of all the nations. What's a disciple? A person who looks, talks, thinks like Jesus Christ. Because he's the smartest person that ever lived. The more like him you become, the more human you become. So, that's what we're going for. So then what we say is, okay, now, how do I communicate it to you in a way that doesn't punch you with my words? I can reveal what's in my heart, which is pain, and I'm defining any negative emotion as pain. You feel sad, you're in pain. You're disgusted, you're lonely, you're discouraged, you're in pain. There's physical pain and then there's psychological pain. They're both real. So, if we're in pain, now we go to the back page here. Go ahead and turn to your back page. Some of you might be familiar with this, some of you might not. This is a way of communicating called nonviolent communication. First time I heard this, I thought it was silly. What do you mean, violent with my words? Let me tell you, violent with my words. Scout, you really disrespected me because, you never think about me. You're always thinking about yourself. I just punched him with my words. So I said disrespected, which is my judgment of his intention, and then that he thinks about himself, so I'm making a judgment, another judgment and criticism of him. And so, of course he's going to get defensive. So I'm very unlikely to get my wants and needs met if that's how I talk. Okay. So the two parts of this model are empathetically listening and honestly expressing. So if you are the one with pain, then you are doing the honestly expressing side. You are saying what happened, just the facts. If anybody's older, you saw Dragnet when you were older. Sergeant Friday, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. So you talk about what happened, just the facts, and then you connect it to how you feel, and then you connect it to your unmet want or need. So if I'm honestly expressing as you follow it, you make an observation, you connect it to your feelings, which are on the list, which don't implicate wrongdoing on anybody else's part, and then you connect it with the phrase, because I wanted, needed, hoped, wished, desired something, because if I say, I feel hurt because you didn't do such and such, I just punched you. I just created a conflict. Because now I'm saying you did something wrong. Now whether you did something wrong or not is God's decision. I'm just telling you, I'm not smart enough to figure it out in every case, whether you did something morally wrong. So I actually want to try to get my wants and needs met, so I'm going to talk to you in a way that decreases your defensiveness and opens your heart so you can actually hear me, so I get the understanding for my pain that I want to help me move toward reconciliation with you. Okay. Then, at the end, I might make a request. I might say, and I'm wondering if you can help me understand what was going on for you when you said this, or did this, or made that face, or whatever it happened to be. So I'm seeking understanding, because I want understanding, but maybe I haven't accurately interpreted what the other person did. So I want to ask before I make the judgment about what they did. Can you help me understand? Because think about it, don't you want to be talked to that way? If you do something and someone else feels hurt, don't you want them to ask you what was going on for you before they make a judgment about you? So remember, love your neighbors, you love yourself. It's very practical. Okay. The other side is empathetically listening. So empathy comes from two Greek words. Empathos. It means in emotion, where you're in it enough to understand it so you can reflect it, but you don't have to feel it yourself. That's sympathy. You're angry, I'm angry. You're sad, I'm sad. That's sympathy. Empathy, I don't have to feel what you feel or agree with you in order to give you empathy. So, you can say whatever you want to say, even if it's totally opposed to my moral code and everything I think is good and right and holy and great, and I can still give you empathy, and vice versa. Let's say I am so frustrated with my comb because it just won't get my hair over the way that I like it to be, and it's really hard, and you can't relate because you have lovely locks, and they're long and luxurious, and you've never had hair challenges. And just because you've never experienced that doesn't mean you can't give me empathy. You can say, "Oh, Nate, man, it sounds like you feel frustrated because what you want is your comb to work." And never feel what I feel or agree. And I could be like, "Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks for understanding." So you can give empathy to anybody, anytime, regardless of what they're saying or doing. So the 4 parts of giving empathy to another person are observations. When this happened, when so-and-so said this, when you did this. It sounds like, here's the phrases, if you want to know how to reflect to somebody else their feelings, it sounds like you feel. I'm guessing you're feeling. It seems like you're feeling. And notice they're tentative. I'm not making a dogmatic statement about what you feel because I might be wrong. So I'm going to guess tentatively. You know what? When you fell down, it seems like you were feeling embarrassed. And what you were wanting was safety and to save face and these kinds of things. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, it's so embarrassing. Everybody was looking at me like, what was going on? So you can listen. There's the facts. Here's the feelings connected to the unmet wants, needs, hopes, desires, wishes. And then all of a sudden, the other person feels understood. Now ask yourself, what do you really want when you are in emotional pain? To be understood. Anything else? What do you want? Take a deep breath.
Comfort.
You might want comfort. Reassurance. Relief. Oh, you might want relief because you're in pain. Remember, any negative emotion is pain. So you want relief. Us human beings are designed for pleasure. In the Garden of Eden, That's what we had. Perfectly, because our hearts were perfect. We're designed for pleasure. Pleasure is good in the right context. So if we are not having pleasure or relief, we need relief to get back to a pleasure state. That's a whole other conversation, which we're not going to get into right now. Okay, so we want these things when we're in pain. And so we say to ourselves, well, how do I give this to somebody else? Remember, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So, if I'm empathetically listening, which I can do regardless of what you're doing or saying, I can still give you empathy. And you're in pain because you're outside of the garden and now all your wants and needs are not met perfectly, then this is how I do it. It sounds like you're feeling because you were wanting, because you were hoping for. And then you might say, is that right or is that close? And that takes us to the next level where then we're down at the place where the treasure is. That really sensitive, fragile, holy space of the human being. That deeper part of us. So when we're down there, we're checking to see if we're close. Because we know that what we want is understanding. And so how do we give that to this person? So when this happened, you felt this way because you were wanting this. Is that close? Is that right? And then you keep listening, and then you keep giving empathy. Over and over and over until the pain messages stop. The fastest way to work through a conflict with any human being is to go for the pain. If you want to resolve a conflict with someone, go for the pain. What is the pain? Any negative emotion that they are feeling. You want them, because you probably want that too. So if you want them to be in a state of relief or peace, then go for the pain. How do you go for the pain? With this. You have a mindset that says, I want to love my neighbor as I love myself. I want to present to them my body, my whole self, as a way to hold this space so that they can download the truth of what they're experiencing in a way that feels safe, so we can get to that precious space down here, be understood, connect, and then be able to love one another freely. That's what we're trying to do. Does anybody not want that? That is a natural state for us to want. Some of us have so much trauma that isn't what we want because it's too dangerous. That level of intimacy is too dangerous because that space has been violated. I'm going to get you right after we finish, okay? That space has been violated, and so we're no longer safe. So we don't go there anymore. So you only have superficial relationships where you completely withdraw from the possibility of connecting with others because it's too painful. You'd rather be alone on an island than to be with so-and-so. Or to be around so-and-so. Okay. So I'm going to do a little example. Is there a volunteer that would be willing to come up here and help me out? Oh, thank you. Come on up. Thanks. That was real convenient. This is my son, Ari. Hello. And so what we're going to do is he's going to be telling me something that is painful for him that happened with his siblings, and I am going to try to give him empathy. So, what side of this am I on? Empathetically listening. That's right. So if I'm in an empathetically listening mode, he is saying, please, please help me get my wants and needs met. So I automatically know what to do. I get into the state of trying to help him get his wants and needs met because I'm trying to love my neighbor as I love myself. Okay. So, Ari, go ahead and tell me what happened with your siblings. Say it nice and loud so everybody can hear it.
So I was playing Legos in my room, and my sister and brother just came in and were like, Ari, it's lunchtime. And then they stepped on all my awesome Legos that I just built. And I was so mad because
so cool. And you don't want that to happen anymore. Is that right? Oh my goodness. Was there anything else you want to tell me? No? Okay, I got it on the first time. Good for me. Okay, now sometimes this goes on for a while. Because there's a lot of pain. And you don't have to say this, but has anybody ever had a boil drained? Or lanced, like you had pus that needed to come out? Yeah. Well, if you've done that, you know that it comes out in, slowly. It oozes out. It might burst and then it oozes out. And then you need to put a little pressure and squeeze it out. I won't go on. Lest you have sickness of stomach. And you have to go a little at a time. So let's say he had lots of feelings about this. So with my mindset, what would I want? I want someone to understand my pain and to have the time and the willingness to engage me, to hold the space, to hear my feelings, to reflect them to me so that I can feel understood. So I want to give that to him. All right, now, what about if someone is mad at you? Because they don't like what you did, said, anything. Ooh, that's a little harder to listen to. It's a little easier to give empathy over there. But when someone is right up in your business saying that they're mad at you, most of us get real sensitive. Okay, so come up a little bit closer. Ari's going to be mad at me. And so we are going to have a little conflict right now. Now, he's working really hard not to smile right now. But if this were real life, there'd be a lot of heat here, because this goes on regularly at our house all throughout the week, whether it's mom or me with the children. We're trying to do this, and there's a lot of energy. Okay. Go ahead.
Why didn't you let me jump on the trampoline for 5 more minutes last night?
Well, it sounds like you feel frustrated and you wanted more time.
It's true. But I still don't understand why he's not this.
Okay, so you want some, you're frustrated because you want information. Okay. So, do you have any more feelings, or do you want to hear what my answer is? You want to hear my answer? Okay. Well, my answer is, if I give you 5 more minutes, and 5 minutes turns into 10 or 15 minutes, and then I have to keep saying the same thing, and then it's hard to get you in the house, but I need to get you to bed, because if you don't get to bed, you're going to be in a bad mood, and then everybody pays for it if you're in a bad mood. And so I want to get started right now, even though I know 5 minutes is not a big deal. That's Thank you. Thank you, Art. So, us parents usually have reasons why we're doing these things. Sometimes it's our own nonsense, and we need to own that. Because I'm lazy. Because whatever. So that's the truth sometimes too. So as much as possible, let's try to give good explanations. And if we can grant 5 minutes, grant it. But if not, then there's a boundary. We set it, we follow through, and then we give empathy. Because it's painful. We don't always get everything that we want. Has anybody ever gotten everything that they want, need, hope, wish, or desire in every moment, 24/7, since conception? No? Okay. Well, then you need some empathy. Because that's painful. To not get everything that you want in just the way that you want it since the moment of conception. Now, most of us don't remember anything prior to age 3. That's implicit memory, right hemisphere stuff, so it's not really there. Although we have body memory from early on. Some of us carry body memory, tissue memory, trauma. So that stuff can be addressed. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I need to come to a close pretty soon. All right, so we have 2 scenarios. We have honestly expressing, I'm in pain. Let's say that Crystal here has a habit of, whenever she sees me, she just gives me a little kick in the shin. Just a little kick. And her shoes always are steel-toed. So for whatever reason, she always wears steel-toed pumps, and she always gives me a little kick in the shin. And I don't know why. So maybe after the 10th time, because I'm trying to give her a little grace, like maybe she didn't mean to do this, but when I hear her going like this, and she kicks me, then I'm like, ugh, that hurts. And so I go up to Crystal and I say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And if she says yes, then I say, I just need to share with you, when you kick me with your steel-toe pumps, it hurts my shins, I'm in pain, and I'm wondering, can you help me understand the reason that you're doing this? Now, did I say that she did anything wrong by kicking me in the shins with her steel-toe pumps? No. I'm just sharing with her that when she does that, it hurts, and I want some information to help me understand. Maybe she has some sort of a foot Tourette's. You never know. I don't know. It could be. And so I want to seek understanding. So I share with her. So that's the honestly expressing side. If you have pain, you go to honestly expressing. In your own time, you can read through the examples of what it's going to sound like. If we had all day, then we'd talk more about this. But we just have a little bit of time. The other side is empathetically listening, which I demonstrated with Art. Now, this requires a tremendous amount of practice because most of our default mode is to listen by either being distracted, disapproving, minimizing, relating, being a topper. There's all these different listening styles. And the other person is not satisfied in the exchange. But remember, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So I care about this. How do they lead the exchange? So if I'm empathetically listening, I want to put on my best listening skills, which is my presence, my focus, thinking that they're in a please mode. Please help me get my wants and needs met for understanding. My body language suggests that I'm dialed in, and then I'm listening for what are they feeling, and what are they wanting or needing, hoping, wishing, or desiring. And then I want to reflect that to them, because somewhere in that exchange is magic. The magic is a person, when they feel understood, softens. Almost every time when my wife and I have a conflict, if she has the space to provide this for me and give to me the understanding that I'm wanting, it just goes away from me. It just melts away. I don't need anything else from the exchange. I don't need an I'm sorry. I don't need a this or that. I just need understanding. Is that true? So, the empathetically listening allows you to connect their feelings to their unmet wants and needs, and then you might say, well, tell me more. Is there anything else? Is there anything else you want me to understand? Because you're trying to love your neighbor as you love yourself. How nice would it be if you're sharing pain with somebody, and after you say a few things, they say, well, is there anything else? Well, now you have freedom to get more empathy for your pain. And that feels really good. If you want to see someone who's all wound up tight, then you're seeing someone who has not gotten much empathy for their pain. They're just ready to fight. Because it hasn't been let out. And if we don't let this stuff out, it makes us sick. You might get lower back pain. You might get cancer. I mean, really, we get sick. We might get an autoimmune disorder. Because it affects us. We're so psychosomatic, mind-body connected, that if we don't ventilate our pain, at least to God, to ourselves, or someone else, it goes in. So, we have the opportunity to give a gift to each other, to love our neighbors, we love ourselves, to provide the space for other people to express themselves, to ventilate their pain, so that they can be at peace. And guess what? If every human being got all the empathy that they needed, you know how many policemen we would need? Not very many. There's not going to be very much nonsense, because people are not walking around in pain. Now, I know there's other issues like addiction and neurochemical deficiency and imbalance and these kinds of things that affect how we behave. But a whole lot of us walk around, and because we're in pain, we misbehave. We're edgy, we're critical, we're unhelpful. We might be angry, that's right. Okay, so these are some things to think about for you if you want to try something different. This isn't the only way, it's a way. It's a tool in your toolbox. If you want to try something new to increase your chances of either getting understanding for your own pain or helping someone else get the understanding for their pain that they need so they can release it and move forward with peace of heart, this is an opportunity for you. If you're not strong enough of soul, ask God to strengthen the structure of your soul so you can tolerate more reality. I need that. I did not have very much strength of soul in certain areas when I got married. And I thought I was pretty strong and this and that, but not so much. As I've prayed this more and more, I've had more and more space to go toward my wife instead of run the other way. Now, going toward is the best way to help me get my wants and needs met for understanding. And when I do that, it just goes away, and then we can be back at peace and do life together. Why did you get married in the first place? Why do you have relationships in the first place? Lots of reasons. Usually it's so that life is more meaningful, safe, happy, fun, fulfilling, connected. So if we can do things that help that state perpetuate, less. And not just practically, but because that's what God tells us to do, and He's so smart. So we either have a chance to believe Him and do what He says and have the benefits. I know it's complicated and hard. We're going to have to practice to change our habits and move in a path that leads to peace, or we're going to keep doing whatever we've been doing that has largely been ineffective. Now, some of you have really good tools. This is the last thing I'll say. Some of you have really good tools. And you already have a way of doing conflict navigation in a way that's successful. So you can listen to today and just say, oh, that's interesting. And maybe it's just a tool in the back pocket for specific situations. And I would celebrate that. But if you don't have specific tools and you're looking for something specific to help you navigate conflict in a loving way, then this is something for you to consider. So, before we go into a time of reflection, does anybody have any questions? We can be interactive. I know this church, it's okay. Anybody have any questions that they want to ask for clarification? And I know that more than 12 people, we get a little quiet because we're self-conscious and insecure and we don't want other people to judge us. So I understand, but if you feel safe enough, please, any questions that you have. Sit down together and talk things out. That's right. That's helpful. Anybody else? Yes?
Okay, mine is the concept that I feel triggered, like I have a high level of alertness. Before I sit and express this in honest expressing, do you guys, it'd be smarter for me to lower down that higher emotional state and wait about like for the situation?
You know, that is a great question that I wish I would have talked about. Thank you for bringing that up. There's so much here that we need to unpack. Yes, sometimes we're so elevated that you can't even think about having a constructive conversation. All you can think about is ripping heads off.
I know.
So then we say to ourselves, well, what do I need to do to de-escalate, get into a space where I can actually connect in a way that's respectful and either do the empathetically listening or honestly expressing. So sometimes some of us need to just withdraw. Now, I would suggest you say to the person, I need to go calm down, I'll be back. So, verbalize, say something so that they know what's happening. I'll be back in 10 minutes, I'll be back in 20 minutes, I need to go calm down. And then when you go calm down, either do something very physically aggressive, push-ups, sprinting, jump roping, stand on your head, that makes all the blood flow to your brain and changes your neurochemistry. Punching, so you can punch a bag, you can punch the pillows, do something very physical. Get that energy out so that you start to come down a little bit. Or some of you may need to just withdraw, get safe, and you need to do some breathing exercises. In through the nose, breathe in from your diaphragm, exhale through your mouth. 4, 4, 4. Breathe in 4, hold 4, exhale 4. Nice and slow. Some of you need to do bilateral stimulation. You need to tap the outside of your knees. You need to move your eyes back and forth. You need to just walk in place, because that makes your brain process information and disturbance in an accelerated fashion so that you can move to a place where you feel less elevated. So a walk, a run, moving this, tapping, breathing, praise music, all those kinds of things to de-escalate yourself so that you can then re-engage in a way that's possibly mutually constructive. Thank you for the question. Super important. Any other questions? Yes? You got to stand up and speak up.
My son has autism.
Yes? High functioning or low?
High
High functioning.
He goes off.
What's his
Trying
name?
to figure out how.
Okay, so we have a high functioning son with autism, flips his lid, which they do. They're very irrational, very self-focused, and it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, a high functioning autism person. And so, because they need consistency, they need order, they need structure, and then they want everything that they want the way that they want it, just like me. So what do? Well, honestly, a person who has autism probably benefits from an antidepressant because it just calms things in the brain. Blue-green algae, supplements to help balance brain chemistry, and then you can still give empathy and set boundaries. It looks like you feel really upset right now, and you want this, and it's really hard for you right now. I just want you to know I see that. But that doesn't mean you give in. So a person, if you have strength of soul, can be elevated, and it doesn't mean we have to give in. That's tough. You have to have strength of soul to tolerate that. That's a good question. So if you want to talk more, come up after. But there's some tough situations to do this. But that's what I would generally say, is here's what's going to happen, but you can give him empathy as many times as you want to. And someone else had a question, then we'll end. Yes?
I was wondering if this were a talk, are you or your wife a counselor? How do you know all of this so well?
You know, I have a lot of problems. So I've just learned a few things over the years. I work with people sometimes, so, do this stuff sometimes.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so April, if you'll come up, and what I want you to do is just think to yourself, are there any relationships where I would benefit from honestly expressing, or are there any relationships where I need to be understood? And any one relationship where other people need to be understood? And so I just want you to think, as April plays for a minute, just think about your life. Because remember, why are we doing this? Love your neighbors, you love yourself. Make disciples of all the nations. Help people become more like Jesus. How do I want to be treated? Who's my neighbor? That's why we're talking about these things. This is the practical side of how to love your neighbor as you love yourself. One side of that. So just take a minute to just be quiet and think about your life, and then I'll say a few things, and then we'll be done. So what we're going to do now is if the ushers can come forward, we're going to gather our morning offering. If you're new here, please don't put anything in the basket unless it's an orange card for information. We want you to receive today. If you regularly come, feel free to give. And then afterwards, if any of you would like prayer, we're going to have our elders and some of the elders' wives and anyone on the prayer team be up front. If you just want prayer, if you want to confess sin, to unburden your heart, we want you to come up. The Wesleyans, the Methodist Church, the way that they used to do their meetings is they'd sit around and they would say to each other, what sin has befallen you since we last met? And they would sit around and confess sin to one another as a part of their service. So if you have a heart that is burdened, maybe you've interacted with someone in an unloving way and you know it, and you want to confess that, and then use some of these tools to go to that person and try to reconcile it, I want you to feel free. So, the other thing is, afterwards, we're going to have a meeting for the Children's Healing Prayer Team. So if your children wanted to be a part of that and they signed up with me 3 weeks ago, or any of your children want to be a part of that, we're going to do a little training today, because once a month we're going to have children come up front to pray for physical healing for people. Because I believe children have pure hearts, and I want them to just be able to pray for people, and I want them to see God do things in people's lives. Heal physically. So that's what we're going to end with today. Feel free to come up, and may the Lord bless you and keep you and give you all peace. Thanks for coming.